Researching the Mandela effect, I kind of bumped into the theory of the grand solar minimum. This is a theorized 400-year period that our sun has reportedly already entered into with fewer solar flares and increased coronal mass ejections. These CMEs create geomagnetic storms on Earth. And these magnetic storms are known to create more frequent and stronger, beautiful aurora borealis, but they also interfere with electrical communication equipment. Not only that, they also weaken the Earth's magnetosphere, which some people call the Earth's magnetic shield or the Earth's magnetic field. Now, the Earth's magnetosphere is directly related to the Schumann resonance. And when the Schumann resonance, which is considered the Earth's hum at 7.83 hertz, goes into gamma wave frequency, these are spikes above 37 hertz, what kind of an effect can that have on the human brain, which also operates in measurable hertz frequencies? And even more important than that, once the brainwave is affected, how do these altered brainwave frequencies affect consciousness? Now, you may be more familiar with the alpha, beta, theta, and delta brainwaves, also measured in hertz. But gamma brainwaves are very, very special. They range between 38 and 100 hertz. They are the fastest of all. And according to some studies, gamma waves in the brain lead to simultaneous information processing from all the different areas within the brain. Gamma brain waves also are known to enhance the vibrancy of reality. This would be sensory perception, like sights, sounds, and smells would be more powerfully experienced. Gamma brain waves also have been attributed to people with higher IQs or advanced learning capabilities. Some popular consciousness researchers and authors like Cynthia Sue Larson, Lynn McTaggart, Joe Dispenza, Bruce Lipton, Greg Braden, I'm sure you're familiar with all of these writers. They even suggest that gamma brainwaves can modulate perception and consciousness, which results in expanded awareness. That can also result in spiritual growth and sometimes even spontaneous healings. Those who experience more gamma brainwave activity during meditation, they often report feeling more compassionate, or they kind of have this at one-ment with all of creation. And if you look at the word atonement, it actually breaks down into at one-ment. And these are really considered transcendental experiences where you meet God and God is described or felt as all that is, was, or ever will be, and becomes inseparable from the person experiencing God, or source energy if you prefer, during these transcendental experiences. And that's what gamma brainwaves lead to. So for us to conclude that a scattered or thinned magnetosphere, which has been getting increasingly scattered and thinned the last 7 decades, that these can affect the Schumann resonance, which in turn can alter brainwave frequency, which in turn can change a person's perception, that doesn't take a great leap in faith. It's extremely logical to think that what's happening with the resonance of the Earth will actually affect the resonance of our brain. But it's not just solar activity that affects the magnetosphere. There are increasing scientific reports that the entire solar system is traveling through occasional clouds of gamma radiation and even helium clouds. Some speculate that these energetic clouds may be emanating from a galactic sun, actually the core of the Milky Way. And some have been speculating that at the core of our galaxy is a white hole, a black hole, or a quasar. While I was researching all of this concerning the magnetosphere and the Schumann resonance and our brain waves and altered states of consciousness, I discovered some very limited information on what some are calling a photon belt. This is an increased energy in the galaxy that we may be moving through every 6,000 years and every 12,000 years. This is also indicated in the Hindu yugas of ages of rising and falling human consciousness. So just picture rubber bands of increased energy that go around and through the galaxy, and we periodically move through these rubber bands of higher energy every 6,000 years and every 12,000 years. Could the Mandela effect be a side effect of cyclical contracting and expanding consciousness as we go in and out of these photon belts? But it does lead into the scientific area of the great year or the platonic year. It's described either way. It's the same thing. This has been defined as the period of one complete cycle of the equinoxes around the ecliptic approximately every 25,800 years. That's also called one complete cycle of axial precession. Now, why am I getting into this? It's because it seems to be all related. In layman's terms, it's the apparent path that the sun follows in the sky from a single position on Earth, rising on the spring equinox. And when it does so, it rises in one of the zodiac constellations for a period of 2,150 years. So in other words, we're moving now from the sun rising on the first day of spring in Pisces every first day of spring for 2,150 years into the sun rising in Aquarius, the constellation Aquarius, on the first day of spring for the next 2,150 years. It's really just an optical illusion because the sun does not rotate around the Earth, but it's what we see while standing on Earth. Does it really matter which constellation our sun appears to be rising in on the first day of spring for over 2,000 years each? Well, yeah, it can. It does matter if that also correlates with the position of our solar system in or out of a photon belt. It can be used as a galactic clock to predict the rising and falling of human consciousness based on where you are in the galaxy. And one way to determine that would be by following the great year or the platonic year based on where the sun rises in which zodiac constellation. I first heard of suspected Planet 10 or Planet X when I was a child in the 1970s, but it was considered a conspiracy theory, and that was in the good old days when Pluto was still a planet. Zecharia Sitchin popularized the mythical stories of planet Nibiru from his translations of the ancient Sumerian clay tablets, which were written in Babylon, Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq, as long as 6,000 years ago. Those clay tablets postulate repeated flybys with the planet Nibiru every few thousand years. They also talk about Anunnaki, who supposedly enslaved humans thousands of years ago, and they're going to come back now on the next flyby and collect their gold. I really don't want to get into the religious myth and the alien connection. I'd rather stick to the science here today. The Nibiru cataclysm theory, where Nibiru is expected to collide with Earth on its return orbit, started sometime in the mid-90s, but had nothing to do with the writings of Zecharia Sitchin. Some even tied the Nibiru cataclysm theory to the end of the Mayan calendar and the 2012 doomsday prediction, and we're far past that now. For decades, the existence of Nibiru, Planet 10, Planet X, whatever you want to call it, was vehemently denied by the authorities. The theories were considered fringe, hoax, pseudo in every way by mainstream media and mainstream scientists. That is, until the NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory and the California Institute of Technology published a press release on October 4th, 2017. It was called the Super Earth that came home for dinner. This is how it started out. It might be lingering bashfully on the icy outer edges of our solar system, hiding in the dark, but subtly pulling strings behind the scenes, stretching out the orbits of distant bodies, perhaps even tilting the entire solar system to one side. The press release went on to say that it is more likely now than not likely that Planet 9, 10 times the mass of the Earth and 20 times farther from the Sun than Neptune, does really exist. The most telling signs show that Planet 9, which is what they're calling it, may have tilted the planets of our solar system during the last 4.5 billion years, which would explain a long-standing mystery, and that is, why is the plane in which the planets orbit around our sun tilted about 6 degrees compared to the sun's equator? Over long periods of time, Planet 9 would make the entire solar system wobble, just like a top on a table. And another sign a large planet is lingering out there somewhere is that objects from the Kuiper Belt orbit in the opposite direction from everything else in our solar system. In other words, there's something really big out there that we can't see yet that's making them orbit around that unseen large object. They still don't know exactly where Planet 9 is. So far from the sun, it might be really difficult to detect. But they can see the other objects rotating around it, much like our moon rotates around Earth. The confusion over NASA calling this new planet Planet 9 stems from the fact that our original 9th planet, one that I particularly love, it has kind of a heart on the side of it, Pluto, was downgraded to a dwarf planet in 2006. This made room for the 10th planet, Planet X, or Nibiru, to be categorized officially as our 9th planet again, or the new 9th planet, or Planet 9-2, or son of Planet 9. You see what I mean? Calling Planet 10 Planet 9 kind of covers up the fact that so-called conspiracy theorists have been talking about this planet and writing about it for not only decades, but hundreds of years. In fact, going back all the way into ancient texts of Sumeria, Mesopotamia. I think it's important for you to research the mystical significance of the number 9, the mathematical anomalies of the number 9, look into Dante's 9 spheres, etc., just to understand why we're not allowed by the authorities to have a 10th planet. Another interesting point is that this new, previously denied planet was announced somewhat quietly, and most people missed it. You think if they had found another planet, good evidence for another planet in our solar system, they would have been shouting it from the rooftops, but they didn't. Now let's look at something else that could be tugging and pulling on our solar system and tilting it off on the plane of the Milky Way galaxy. Author and speaker Billy Carson introduced me to the studies that show we may actually be on a smaller galaxy moving through the much larger galaxy called the Milky Way. The infrared 2-micron all-star survey, led by astronomers at the University of Massachusetts, published their findings in the Astrophysical Journal. This shows how the Sagittarius dwarf galaxy, which contains our solar system, is 10,000 times smaller than the Milky Way, and as such, as it is passing through the Milky Way, it's being stretched and pulled in all directions. This isn't as shocking as it sounds at first, because galaxies occasionally collide, forming bigger galaxies in the process. So in 2003, the University of Virginia modeled our Sagittarius dwarf galaxy to show how it fits into the much larger Milky Way galaxy at a slightly different plane of inclination. So this explains the tilting of our solar system when you look at it compared to the Milky Way galaxy. So how does this tie into the Mandela effect, you might ask? Good question. If we are on a smaller galaxy moving through a much bigger galaxy, we could also be encountering space debris or energetic fields called dirty space that would have a tugging effect not only on our solar system, but also on our magnetosphere and on our brainwaves. When I first started researching the Mandela effect back in 2016, I bumped into a University of Wisconsin study that showed all the planets in our solar system are getting hotter and more luminous now. This is another fact that most people don't know about because it would kind of blow the narrative of global warming due to human activity if all planets are heating up at relatively the same rate. You're in store for even more stretching, pulling, and tugging on our solar system and brainwaves if you watch an amazing documentary on YouTube called The Great Year, and that's on the Binary Research Institute channel. For me, it is by far the most logical explanation for the rash of geophysical anomalies we've been experiencing, like the magnetic pole drift, the scattered magnetic shield, the rising Schumann resonance, the heating up and increased luminosity of all planets now. Just look at Jupiter and Venus, and you can see with your own eyes how extremely bright they've become in just the last couple of years. And this new theory about Nemesis, or a binary twin sun to our sun, could also explain the Mandela effect, or expanded human consciousness. It explains how almost all stars in our galaxy and all stars in other galaxies have a binary twin, if not a triplet. These stars are orbiting around each other in elongated orbits over long periods of time. They illustrate how a binary twin to our sun, which is often called Nemesis, or if you're looking at the Hopi myth, you'll be looking at the blue Kachina and the red Kachina, Nemesis and Nibiru. It's a kind of a combination myth or religious belief. And according to the Great Year documentary, this binary twin sun to ours would be a brown dwarf, so we couldn't really see it as glowing with telescopes. It would be fairly dark, but you could see it based on its gravitational effect on us, the solar system, and nearby planets and debris around it, which is what NASA was using to theorize that we have a huge super Earth or Planet 9 way out there past Neptune doing the same thing. So it could be a possibility of a combination of Planet 9 and a binary twin, or it could just be the binary twin sun out there causing the same effects. So they go on to explain how this binary twin sun would be on a 26,000 year cycle around our sun, and that could cause all of these anomalies and more, including increased volcanic eruptions and earthquakes as it tugs at the Earth's surface as it comes nearer and nearer to our sun and our planet. The scientists, all very credible in this documentary, even postulate a speeding up of time that would shrink our twin sun's orbit from 26,000 years to 24,000 years as it increases in velocity when it nears our sun. Is Earth on a cyclical 24,000 year binary twin star cycle that fits in nicely with the precession of the equinoxes and the Hindu yugas of rising and falling consciousness? I think this free documentary on YouTube, The Great Year, in which many scientists around the world participated, is very important to our understanding of possible natural galactic causes of the Mandela effect. It also goes a long way in explaining why people feel like time is speeding up now. And if you start to count the old-fashioned way you were taught in elementary school, for example, 1 1000, 2 1000, 3 1000. In England, they were taught 1 elephant, 2 elephant, 3 elephant. Where I come from, we were taught 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. Go ahead. Close your eyes, count the way you were taught to count a true second in elementary school, and do it to a stopwatch on your phone. And open your eyes after about 10 seconds, and you will see that time has in fact speeded up. And it's very difficult to count the actual seconds, to say those words fast enough to keep up with how fast those seconds are now going by. So the binary twin sun coming nearer to our sun, the yellow sun, and to Earth could explain the thinning magnetosphere, and a thinning magnetosphere also leads to a magnetic pole drift. So you've all heard of the magnetic pole flip, shift, or drift. It appears to be completely natural and tied to the interior workings of the Earth in conjunction with its rotation, and related to the magnetic field or magnetosphere and the Schumann resonance. The magnetic North Pole naturally drifts a little north and south every year. That's called drift. But its drift is becoming faster and more erratic over recent decades. So is the scattering and the breaking up of the Earth's magnetic field and the Schumann resonance spikes also causing a magnetic pole drift? Do you think really it is entirely coincidental that the Mandela effect is being seen by more and more people as these geological anomalies increase? The best source I could find on the magnetic pole shift was in a Freedom of Information Act released book called The Adam and Eve Story by Chan Thomas. This is a wonderful mystery for me personally because I found a highly sanitized FOIA Act release document on CIA.gov with only 56 pages of the original 232-page book released in the United States by the United States government. However, I also managed to buy a photocopy of that book on eBay for just over $100. Although the only other copy for sale on the internet was asking $1,000 for it. So it looks like the information in this book is not so top secret after all, if there are two sources of it for people to buy on the internet. And this was released through the Freedom of Information Act on CIA.gov. But back to the magnetic pole flip theory. In the Adam and Eve story, Chan Thomas proposes a cyclical magnetic pole shift cataclysm, and the evidence that he uses is in the geological record every 6 to 11,000 years. He's not alone in this. He credits this theory, called Crust displacement theory, to highly regarded scientists, geologists, paleontologists, anatomists, and biologists going all the way back to André de Luc in 1779. So scientists have been writing about the crust displacement theory for hundreds of years. Not only because so many scientists found evidence in our geological record to support it, but also because human written history only goes back to the Sumerian cuneiform clay tablets, originally considered to be about 6,000 years old. It had the original story of Noah and the flood in the epic poem of Gilgamesh. And 6,000 years ago, there is geological evidence of a very large flood. So the theory is that geological evidence shows that between 6 to 11,000 years, the electromagnetic orderliness inside the Earth is disrupted. Could be because of a scattered magnetic shield. This allows the molten layer to act like free liquid, pulling the shell or the crust of the Earth around like a spinning top. Interestingly, the Adam and Eve story also describes the popular new rabbit hole, mud floods, in addition to rising and falling continents and global sporadic flooding as a part of this process of crust displacement. So is it an unseen super Earth, or an unseen binary twin sun, or the fact that we're on a smaller galaxy moving through a much larger galaxy, really pulling and tugging on our solar system, that it could cause all of these disturbances? Maybe. It also could be any combination of them. If so, if any one of these things or combination of them is pulling and tugging on the magnetosphere, affecting the Schumann resonance, affecting the pole drift, why wouldn't that also affect the waves of human consciousness, resulting in the Mandela effect? Also, could the increasingly scattered and thinned magnetosphere be the reason of reported chemtrailing, This is officially called stratospheric aerosol injection or solar management, reportedly used since the 60s or 70s. These are highly reflective nanoparticles of aluminum, barium, strontium used to reflect and deflect increasing cosmic and solar radiation. All of this is reported but not proven. But if it's true, and the chemical spraying in the air wards off extinction level radiation, then chemtrails would in fact be good for us and all life on the planet. However, if it's only being used to protect our aging electrical grid for security purposes, then it could be detrimental to cellular biology. It might not be worth it. I'm not certain if chemtrail is being used, as it's been proposed by Harvard scientists to be used in the future. Any one of the cosmic changes we've been talking about today could actually warrant the use of chemtrailing. But this leads us to yet another possible cause of the Mandela effect. The chemicals used in solar radiation management programs could possibly be responsible for the Mandela effect. If they are already being used for decades and not merely being proposed, aerosol nanoparticles of highly reflective barium, aluminum, and strontium could interact with the human brain in unknown ways to actually affect changes in perception and consciousness. This could indicate that matter has always responded to collective consciousness, flipping and flopping in response to collective memory, but that the human mind could not see matter changing until somehow enhanced with the chemicals in chemtrails. This would explain why the Mandela effect is such a recent phenomenon. And please remember, this is all speculation, as we've nothing authoritative to review on side effects of stratospheric aerosol injection. I hope you realize by now that I'm not supporting any one of these particular theories as the cause of the Mandela effect. Until we know more about all of them, I think it's a good idea, though, to leave them on the table as possibilities and to keep watching out for changes and studies that relate to a binary twin sun or Planet 9 or magnetic pole drift or the grand solar minimum. The increased energy that any one of these things alone could cause in and around our planet or solar system, or in and around bodies on Earth, could easily account for changes in consciousness. Especially since, according to the quantum world, everything is in wave form, and waves are easily interfered with. So if we're truly entering the age of Aquarius, where we'll remain for the next 2,000 years plus, why wouldn't that include a new age of consciousness too, where we could actually see the energy waves of matter shift and change and flip and flop as they respond to the waves of collective consciousness? This might be a good time to bring up the elephant in the room. Is the Earth flat or round? Or is it another shape? The shape of an eyeball, or a dome, or a turtle? The only thing I'm certain is I do not know. I don't have an answer for that. And I don't think any of us will ever have an answer 100% definitely true until we rise up high enough to see the Earth with our own eyes. Once we see it, we'll know. And for the purposes of today's information, it really doesn't matter, because it's very possible, for me, probable, that we live in a holographic, multidimensional reality matrix, where each small part contains the whole. In other words, information in light, coded into matter. So for today, it really doesn't matter what shape the Earth is. And hiding behind that elephant is another elephant, and that would be considering how much we truthers, who used to be called conspiracy theorists, have been lied to. Should we trust anything that NASA or mainstream scientists ever tell us again? Some people even call NASA never a straight answer. So all I can say is that we have to deal with what we have been given to work with. And let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater, because just because they got caught lying to us about a couple of things, or we suspect they were lying, or it's highly likely they were lying, that doesn't mean necessarily that they are lying to us about everything. So some of those scientific findings out there in the mainstream are very accurate and can help us in terms of deciphering possible causes and the mechanisms of the Mandela effect. So is this new super Earth or binary twin sun or Sagittarius dwarf galaxy traveling through the Milky Way, or the Schumann rising and the magnetosphere thinning and becoming scattered, and the magnetic North Pole drifting further south, and a possible crust displacement? Are any of these possible causes of the Mandela effect? Of course they could be, because they have a significant impact on the waves in the air, and the air is not a vacuum empty of energy. Some people even consider it a very light plasma that cannot really be detected with the eyes, but that connects us all, and then also connects us to life off of Earth. Kind of like a galactic internet. And the mechanism is the plasma, the energy, the information and light that is all around us all the time. I hope by now you realize I'm not supporting any one of these theories over the others, or possibly a combination of one or more of them could be responsible for causing the so-called Mandela effect, which is really a quantum consciousness effect. The Adam and Eve story postulates rather well that there's geological evidence that there have been many advancing and retreating ice ages, and that the magnetic North Pole has been positioned all over the planet at different times. We could consider this a cyclical reset of life on Earth, where corrections to unsustainable Earth-damaging systems occur, so that negative or harmful life systems on the planet never have enough time to completely destabilize or destroy this beautiful planet we call Earth. Kind of like an Earth fail-safe mechanism. So now you can see why we don't necessarily need particle colliders, quantum computing, artificial intelligence, or even time travel to explain the Mandela effect. With so much going on cosmologically, it seems logical that something as big as the Mandela effect phenomenon is beyond anything humans can make with their own hands. It's instant, it's miraculous, it's unpredictable change that only a portion of humanity can see so far. Thankfully, that portion is growing daily. No doubt soon the whole species will be born seeing it as a natural process of collective consciousness acting on matter, kind of like the 100th monkey effect. And if you're unsure of that theory, look it up and check it out, because it does indicate that all species, especially when you look at like bees and ants and how they behave, all species probably have a collective mind. My hope for the future is that no matter what they tell you in religious texts or mainstream media, no one will doubt that matter responds to consciousness. Our collective thoughts and feelings and actions change our collective matrix. And why is that so important? Because it empowers us. It makes us more responsible while we're here as spirit in a physical material body. Well, guys, because we had to cover so much today in such a short period of time of changes going on out there on the macro level, the cosmos, I hope you will take it as just a starting point and do your own research on all of these topics and more. And keep your eyes on the skies and read science when it pops up to see if there's any possible correlation between that and the Mandela effect that you're experiencing.